Where in the Bible does it say Greece stretches out her hands towards God? Nowhere. That's like saying Greece predates Ethiopia, when in fact Ethiopia has the oldest language on earth. Why? Because the oldest language belongs to the oldest civilization. Hence, Ethiopia is first. But in today's times, it has some so called biblical scholars always referring to Greece as if they are the founders, when in fact they are the heathen. So let's read what the Most High has to say. Ethiopia's belief in the power of prayer is clearly exemplified in the Holy Bible, in the meaningful assertion that Ethiopia stretches out her hands towards God. Haile Selassie I, the Most High. Yet they have people like this giving credit to other pagan places.
A group of Jewish literature, which was very important within sort of the Jewish understanding. So we've largely been talking almost exclusively, I think, about documents that post-date the New Testament documents.
Yeah.
Right? So the Gospels that were written by the various Gnostic groups, those are after Jesus. Enoch comes before Jesus, and it's in a category of literature that was written between the last book of the Old Testament and the first book of the New Testament. So there's about 400 years there. But
first of all, it was called the Book of Testament, for it was just one book. It was not in the Old and New Testament format. That's what was created in the 15th century, because they realized that the prophecy was against them. Therefore, they had to put the prophecy in the past. Imagine the Bible's telling you, woe unto you, and this is going to happen to you in the future. So you're like, wait a second, we have to change this. So they created their own Jewish historians like Flavius Josephus, if not Paul, to confirm their narrative. In reality, they want you to believe that Jesus was here thousands of years ago and Moses was here thousands of years ago. So what is to happen to them happened already. For example, Exodus didn't happen yet. So let's continue listening to this fool.
Between, I mentioned, in the Protestant Old Testament, you have the last book is Malachi. Between Malachi and Matthew, there's a 400-year gap, which is sometimes referred to as the...
You get it? He's referring to the Protestants, which was created in the 15th century. Because if something happened in the 15th century where they just wanted to change up everything, because they realized that the prophecy was against Europe. It was against Greece. It was against Rome. It was against Egypt. So they're giving credit to Egypt, Greece, and Rome. Syria. You understand? When the Bible clearly says, woe unto Syria, woe unto Babylon.
400 years of silence, which is a bit of a misnomer, because it wasn't silent. There was a whole bunch of Jewish literature being written, but there was this cultural understanding within ancient Judaism that the voice of God was not being communicated through prophets in the same way. So that's why it's sometimes referred to as that. However, the Jews are writing all sorts of things. And one of...
Yeah, they was writing all sorts of things in the 15th, 16th century because they're trying to do identity theft of the Ethiopians. They want to act like they were here prior to the Ethiopians, as if Ethiopians had to learn from them, when in fact they converted to Judaism in the 7th century. That's like giving Constantinople the credit for creating Christianity, when in fact he himself was never a Christian. So if he as the leader of Rome wasn't a Christian, he never converted to Christianity, that means Rome weren't Christians or wasn't a Christian state or a Christian empire in the 1st century. So in reality, they're just making up that story of Rome being Christian in the 1st century and they had popes. Nah, you're just making it up.
One of those things that they are writing on was the Book of Enoch. Now, we also need to be careful with the Book of Enoch because what we call specifically First Enoch, there's a First and Second Enoch. When the Book of Enoch is usually referred to, we're usually pointing to the Book of First Enoch. The Book of First Enoch, as it exists, you can go buy a copy of First Enoch. In fact, there's a pretty recent, very good translation of it by the publisher Hermania.
You get it? He's explaining exactly what they do. Ethiopia wrote something, they're going to take credit for it and then edit it and come up with their own version of it so he could continue their Jewish narrative.
Which is the most updated one, takes into consideration things like the Dead Sea Scrolls. And what you have...
You get it? He mixed in the Dead Sea Scrolls with the Enoch. And this is what he's telling you to go by. Hello, weirdo.
There is a collection of various Jewish texts that span about a period of 200 years before Jesus and about 50 to 100 years after.
Hello, the Khazarians converted to Judaism in the 7th century, for they were pagans. They were considered pagans before the 7th century, so they wasn't writing anything in the 200 BC. Stop lying, yo.
Jesus in multiple languages. So you have sections of the Book of Enoch in Aramaic, you have sections in Coptic, and you have sections in Greek. And those are all brought together.
Aramaic is Syria, Iraq, Babylon. So he's basically giving credit to known pagans as if they were the Ethiopians.
In what we call First Enoch. Now, the old sections are really, really old. The old sections are about 200 BC. They're in the 3rd century BC, and they're largely written in Aramaic and Greek. And those...
Shut up. Let's watch. The Ge'ez language is believed by scholars to be over 5,000 years old, making it the oldest of all languages. Therefore, it belongs to the first civilization. Is Amharic older than Hebrew? Considered much older than the Northern Semitic languages such as Hebrew and Arabic. Why? Aramaic is one of the Semitic languages known from almost the beginning of human history. In other words, it comes after Ethiopia, Ge'ez. So it's Amharic, Hebrew, or Arabic. Aramaic is more in common with Hebrew than Arabic. But don't forget, in the 7th century is when Arabics... So let's watch. More lies.
This version of the Bible, or the stories in the Bible, is it the Dead Sea Scrolls, or are there older versions?
The Dead Sea Scrolls are the oldest of the Old Testament. So when they were discovered, so they were discovered in 1946 to 19...
You see, he's telling you something was discovered prior to Ethiopia. That's basically what he's saying. So who has the oldest version on the planet? Ethiopian Bible is the oldest and most complete Bible on earth, and it includes the Book of Enoch. Why? Because it was written in Ge'ez. The legacy of Enoch is part of Ethiopian literature. Ethiopian Bible is the oldest, most complete. Everyone knows this. Yet still, this guy is considered a scholar, and he's giving credit to people who made up their own discoveries on Ethiopian land.
1957. And at that point, during their discovery, they pushed back a lot of our previous oldest manuscripts.
You see, the oldest manuscripts is Ethiopian. But for some strange reason, white people found something that predates Ethiopians' writings on Ethiopian land, because the whole region from Egypt to India used to be called Ethiopia, including the Middle East, including Jerusalem. They were Ethiopians. So let's read. Alexander the Macedonian was the first over Greece, and he made many wars. So he was the first king of Greece, and don't forget, he had children with Egypt. So he fell sick, died. He called his servants and parted his kingdom among them. So Greece started new kingdoms. So, and his servants ruled, everyone in his place. They all put crowns upon themselves, so did their sons and them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth. And there came out of them a wicked root, a hostage of Rome, which is of the kingdom of the Greeks. Don't forget, it went from Egypt to Greece to Rome. They're all connected. So in those days went out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make covenant with the heathen. Whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem, according to the customs of the heathen. They forsook the holy covenant and joined themselves to the heathen. So when the kingdom was established, he taught to reign over Egypt. So he entered into Egypt. They got the strong cities in the land of Egypt. And after that, Antiochus has smitten Egypt. In other words, Egypt is now part of Greece. Greece is part of Egypt. Then builded the city of David, a wall, towers, and a stronghold for them. So they came to the city of David, which was already established by the Ethiopians, and then they built a strong wall and towers, and they put in there in a sinful nation. So they stored the spoils of Jerusalem. So Jerusalem became an evil adversary to Israel. Jerusalem fled, whereupon the city was made an habitation of strangers and became strange to those that were born in her. And her own children left her. In other words, the Ethiopians were not there. Today, we're referring to today. So Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, and everyone should leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed. Yea, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion and sacrificed unto idols. So Jerusalem, Judah, should follow the strange laws of the land. That is what's happening today. To the end they might forget the law and change the ordinances. So that's what this guy is doing. He's literally trying to change the ordinances. And whosoever would not do according to the commandment of the king, he said he should die. So wrote to his whole kingdom. That's Nebuchadnezzar. So he told Judah, which is part of his kingdom, forsook the law, so they committed evils in the land. And wheresoever was found with any of the book of the testament, the king commandment said, put him to death. So they choose rather to die that they might be defiled with the Babylonian meats. Don't forget, all Bibles are translated out of Ethiopian original tongues. So just like the Apocrypha, which is not in the Old and New Testament format. Why? Because it's just supposed to be the book of the Testament. It was not in the Old and New Testament format. So don't listen to fools like this.
1,000 years, which was a big deal.
How old are
They're anywhere between the 3rd century BC and the 1st century BC. So it's kind of tricky because the Dead Sea Scrolls they're like a library that we refer to. So it's approximately 970 documents, but it's just
that they refer to. You get it? So they use Jewish narratives to change the story.
for. And you do have, I mean, you're right in terms of all of these ancient conventions and the ways that things were spread around. But the Gospels are written in the lifetime of the eyewitnesses. And they're written in this period of time where you have groups of individuals who could have fact-checked those things. So,
How do you fact check someone coming back from the dead?
well,
How many people saw his body, right?
Paul says that 400 people saw him all at once.
Paul said it, who is supposed a Jewish historian from the 1st century. And we already know that they were no Jewish people in the 1st century because they didn't become Jewish since the 7th century. So what does it say that God is going to do? God therefore said, the Lord God of Israel, behold, I am bringing such evil upon Jerusalem and Judah, because they have done which was evil in my sight, and have provoked me to anger since the days their fathers came forth out of Egypt, even on to this day. So this guy is continuing their lies. For example,
Ethiopian Bible. Yeah, so the Ethiopian Church has is like a wing of, you have these different sort of overarching denominations of Christendom. You have today Protestants.
He's a Protestant. Follow Jah, not man. We're going to continue with him just now. This is just part 1 to his lies. But in the meantime, remember this.
Only God